Hello, I am Bot. I am a speaker of this presentation. Let's begin, shall we?
All about communication. Communication plays a huge part in our everyday activities. Communication happens when we understand what is being said to us and respond, and when we express our thoughts, needs, and feelings so they can be understood. Why communication is important for a child. A child learns language very quickly in the first years of life. It is important that a child's hearing problem be recognized early and that he receives effective help. If not, the best years for learning communication skills may be lost birth to age 7. The earlier a child begins to learn a language and to practice communicating, the more he can learn. On deafness. In Merriam-Webster medical term, deafness is defined as hearing loss or impairment resulting from defects in the central nervous system, as in the auditory cortex rather than in the ear itself or the auditory nerve. Hearing loss may result from genetic causes, complications at birth, certain infectious diseases, chronic ear infections, the use of particular drugs, exposure to excessive noise, and aging. Myth or fact? Myth. Fact.
All hearing loss is the same. Hearing loss can range from very mild to very severe. People are not intelligent as hearing people. Deaf people are not dumb. They simply can't hear. All persons who are deaf use hearing aids.
Some deaf people prefer not to use hearing aids and some uses cochlear implants.
Most deaf people communicate in sign language. Deaf people have preferences for communication. Hearing aids can restore hearing loss in deaf people. Hearing aids are generally an intervention used for mild to moderate hearing loss. Most deaf people are able to read lips. Not every deaf person uses lip reading as an effective form of communication.
Persons who are deaf are not sensitive to noise. Some type of hearing loss accentuates sensitivity to noise.
Deaf people can't talk.
They can talk depending on the background of the individual and the type of deafness they acquired.
Remember that a person with a disability is a person first.
Words to use and avoid. Use. Avoid. Person with a disability.
Handicap, hearing impairment.
Person who has is. Victim of, stricken with, afflicted with. Person with. Normal. Deaf or hard of hearing. Deaf and mute, deaf and dumb, PP. How to talk to a person who is deaf. When you speak through an interpreter, make sure to look at the deaf person while you are talking. The deaf person is the one who you are having the conversation with, and the interpreter is just there to translate. Looking at the interpreter instead of the person you are talking to is considered rude, and it changes the dynamic of the conversation. Statistics of deafness. According to the World Health Organization, there is 5% of the world's population has disabling hearing loss. 466 million deaf people, 432 million adults, and 34 million children. According to National Deaf Children's Society, more than 90% of deaf children are born to hearing parents. Statistics of deafness in the Philippines. A study conducted in the Philippines by Dr. Charlotte Cheong showed that 8 profoundly hearing deaf babies are born every day. According to a nationwide survey by the Philippine Deaf Resource Center, PDRC, in 2005, they found out that 65 to 70% of deaf boys and girls are being molested. Of the 60 deaf respondents in Manila and Cebu, 1 of 3 women has been raped. On deaf education. Deaf education is extremely important as it is the tool used to bridge the gap between the hearing world and those that are impaired. Deafness should not be treated as an illness, but rather, it is viewed more as a cultural difference. Without high-quality deaf education, children born with a hearing impairment or young children that develop hearing loss face an extreme disadvantage. Statistics on deaf education. According to the Global Partnership for Education, only 2% of the deaf population in the world have access to education in sign languages. According to the World Federation of the Deaf, it's estimated that 80% of the roughly 32 million deaf children around the world lack access to education. Magna Carta. Filipino Sign Language. Filipino Sign Language, FSL, is a sign language originating in the Philippines. Like other sign languages, FSL is a unique language with its own grammar, syntax, and morphology. It is neither based on nor resembles Filipino or English. FSL is believed to be part of the French Sign Language family. It has been strongly influenced by American Sign Language since the establishment in 1907 of the School for the Deaf and Blind, SDB, now the Philippine School for the Deaf by Delia Delight Rice. 1883 to 1964, an American Thomasite teacher born to deaf parents.
Filipino Sign Language is considered the mother tongue of Filipino deaf community. So it is the natural sign language that is being used by a majority of the Filipino deaf as well as most of the Filipino Sign Language interpreters. Filipino Sign Language, just like any other languages, spoken languages, that has its own linguistic features, grammar, syntax, and the likes. FSL it plays a crucial role in preserving the Filipino deaf culture and also it plays a crucial part in the identity of a deaf person. So it's like saying, like bakit mahalaga ang Filipino language sa ating mga Pilipino. Because it's a part yun ng identity natin as a Filipino, right? So it cannot be taken away from us because it's an innate part. It's an innate component of our identity.
Why am I teaching ASL?
There are lots of resources for American Sign Language ASL that can be found online.
Filipino Sign Language is influenced by ASL since the establishment in 1907 of the School for the Deaf and Blind (SDB), now the Philippine School for the Deaf, Idelia Delight Rice, 1883 to 1964. An American Thomasite teacher born to deaf parents. The school was run and managed by American principals until the 1940s.